Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Davis and you are watching Conversations in Pop Culture, brought to you by my sponsors, Mixum Printing, the smarter way to print. I know printing your creative project can be confusing and stressful, but Mixum is here to make it easy. From their instant quote calculator that lets you get as many quotes as you want for free, to their 24-hour customer service support, Mixum is here to make sure your printing experience runs smoothly from start to finish. And right now you can choose from a range of premium printing options and materials. And the company has also printed many successful Kickstarter campaigns, and a bunch of them you have even heard about on this very show. And I know somebody who is using them right now, and I cannot talk about that project, but when that project hits, it is going to be an amazing project. And they currently offer services in the United States, Canada, Australia, and the UK, and Mixum can print and reach your audience anywhere in the world. So if you're ready to print smarter, not harder, head over to Mixum.com. And right now they're running a promotion where listeners of my show can drop my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of a current order to get a 5% discount on that order. So that is Mixam.com. Again, type my name, Andrew Davis, in the message tab of your current order to receive a 5% discount on your first order. And every percentage point counts, whether you're funding $10,000 over or $1,000 over. Discounts help to make sure that you reach your goals, and they deliver an excellent product. Furthermore, when you get your comics back, you're gonna have to bag and board your comics. And right now, BCW Supplies actually is willing to give you 10% off at checkout if you use Pop Anime Comics and in the coupon box during checkout. And believe me, when you are bagging and boarding 300, 400, 500 comics, you need to buy bagging and boards. That could be 50, 60, 70 bucks you could save with my 10% off Pop Anime Comics. So please use that and save yourself some money. And so without further ado, I have with me comic creator and writer and artist Scott Wilke. I think I got your name right this time.
Yep. You nailed it. Good job. Yep.
So I'm making sure, because names are not my thing. As we found out yesterday, clearly on multiple levels on both interviews yesterday. So welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I am very excited because I had you on with somebody who has a beard that I'm very jealous of. I will not mention his name. We don't talk about West Virginia. I'm just saying. I'm just saying. No. It's Mike. Everybody. I'm just letting everybody know.
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah, he has an enviable beard for sure. Yeah, we're all aspiring to that.
It's very upsetting. It's very upsetting. Mine doesn't come in well. It's very upsetting. But we're not going to talk about him because we're talking about you. And you have a comic currently that I think is fully funded on Kickstarter, and that's Periwinkle. And
Yes,
obviously it's Christmassy, but it's not Christmassy. I'm not too sure how to explain this. So I'm going to let you sort of explain this story for those who haven't heard about it or don't know exactly what we're talking about, because it's a very interesting graphic novel.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, if you love Halloween, if you love slasher, bloody, gruesome, Kill Bill style, movies, if you love Christmas and you were hoping that someone eventually would just throw that all in a pot and mix it together, that's what I did. I've had a few people tell me Periwinkle is very similar. It's basically like a Kill Bill meets Elf. So I love that. I'm gonna adopt that and steal that from the multitude of people who have said it. But that's basically what's going on. So I wanted to write. I love Christmas. I should preface that. I'm a big Christmas buff. My wife is. My parents are. So I always wanted to write a Christmas story, but unfortunately, Hallmark took all the good ones, so I was forced to adapt. Um, and I'm a big fan of revenge stories. That's what I like to write. That's what I like to read. So I tried to figure out how I could marry the two. Um, and I wanted to keep the big players out of the story. So there's a lot of Santa origin stories, so I wanted to steer away from that. Next big players obviously would be the elves, so I thought, let's dive into that whole arena. And yeah, it's just all kind of like one big bang moment came together, and Periwinkle was formed.
Yeah, and even to dive further into this, because obviously Krampus and Bellstickle wind up killing Santa. I'm not ruining anything, by the way. I'm letting
No,
everybody know that that's not
no.
what the story's about. It's not how Santa got killed. That might be enjoyable for some people, but that's not what this is pretty disclosed up front.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and this is all about, Periwinkle, who is one of Santa's helper, is out for revenge with Prancer. And Periwinkle is slowly getting closer and closer to what happened, sort of uncovering who did it and discovering who was involved, because in a lot of ways, certain people played certain roles in all of this. And obviously, Periwinkle is going down the rabbit hole, for lack of a better word. And a lot of stuff's going on with this. And, the few preview pages, we get an idea of where we're starting. And so, what was this like, really building this up? Because you're taking out the big players, but still keeping, the big players involved, which is Santa, obviously in the story, but not there, but almost like the impetus. I don't know if I'm explaining that really well, but I think that's kind of what's so
No, you
interesting
totally
about
did. I mean, yeah, you nailed it out of the park. I'm gonna hire you for PR. But yeah, it's essentially Krampus and Bellstickle. You'll learn as to what their motives were. We do disclose those in organizing this coup. Half the elves went along with it. Half of them didn't. So half went with Krampus, and the other half, they went to make cookies in a tree or something. We don't really know, but but yeah. The idea was that, and Krampus and Bellstickle too. I mean, Krampus is well known. I mean, there's a movie, there's a film, so people know that one. Bellstickle, I think, was only made popularized by Mr. Dwight Schrute from The Office. So there's very little knowledge about them. But so Krampus is mildly a big player. Santa, of course, he's the main player of the holiday. And early iterations of the script, I had him much more in the spotlight than currently. Working with Mike Tiener, the bearded genius that he is, I sent him initial scripts on this thing, and one of the initial ones, he was like, where's the Christmas spirit? We dived right into elf slaughter, beheadings, blood, all that. He's like, but where's the Christmas spirit in this thing? So going back, I was like, I think I need to remove, oddly enough, a component of that to achieve that. So that was removing Santa. So he's in the background through the two portions of the story, but ultimately it boils down to Periwinkle and what his motives are, and how the death of Santa affected him, as to what his purpose in life is, what his meaning in life is. And that's something that a lot of people, most people, can relate to. So I
So,
don't know if I
so
answered your question, but
yeah, it's all good. It's all good. It's. I'm going to ask a million questions, and we're going to get there somehow to where I want to be, and which is I don't know where I want to be. So this makes both of us. It doesn't matter if
that's
anybody
two of
answers
us,
anything.
man.
It's
That's two
perfect.
of us, yeah.
Anything could happen. That's live. As Gary Vee said, anything could happen because it's live. That's what makes live live.
Yeah.
Versus pre-recorded. But even going further into this, where obviously you're a big Christmas buff. I'm Jewish, so I'm a little not a Christmas buff by
Okay.
nature.
Yeah.
But I enjoy the holidays. But where did even this idea come from? Because most people during Christmas time say, hey, I enjoy presents, I enjoy gifts, I enjoy receiving things. Now, I am not a fan of the holidays. I find that the time from Thanksgiving to Christmas and even into New Year's is just a miserable 5-6 weeks for me because everything slows down and
Mhm.
my world is just, I don't like slow. I'm not the type of person that likes slow and not doing things.
Yeah,
I
I get
like
that.
things actively happening. I also never get invited to Christmas parties. That also might be the issue. But tabling all that, where did this come from? Because this is very much the anti-Christmas story, where we have an elf killing other elves, trying to kill possibly Belsnickel, possibly trying to kill Krampus. Maybe Santa isn't so good. Maybe the cookies have something in them. I don't know. But it's the idea that clearly this is a very dark, very semi-disturbing tale of Christmas, and also there's blood and gore in it. I mean, I wouldn't give this to, you know, a 7-year-old and be like, Merry Christmas.
Yeah,
Enjoy.
yeah, no. Yeah, no, definitely not. Do not put this as a stocking stuffer for your niece or nephew, for sure. Um, it originated again to that love of Christmas, wanting to write a Christmas story, trying to find what my avenue was to get there. Again, I love revenge stories. Didn't want to really deal with the Santa aspect of it. So that's how that came about. I just really love. And I think what it boiled down to, going back to Periwinkle's origin, is that he comes from a lot of trauma. There's a lot of tragedy in his past, um, and for him, finding that niche in Santa's world kind of gave purpose to all that tragedy. And I felt like that's something a lot. I mean, every generation, millennials, boomers, whoever, there's trauma in your past, and you want to feel like that happened for a reason and not just because fate or who have you is getting their shits and giggles out. So to explore that story, that reconciliation in a character's mind of, okay, this wasn't my meaning, this wasn't my purpose anymore, what is that journey from A to B, was really fascinating. And having the backdrop be Christmas, having the backdrop be the North Pole and Krampus Castle and all that was really fascinating to me. It was a little different. I mean, I could have explored that in more common avenues, with a superhero or whatever, what have you. um, but I felt like there was a space within the Christmas story genre that I could fit my story into. And um, go back to that a little bit even further, is that even if you're not a Christmas fan, I think you're going to love this story. If you're a Christmas fan, you're going to love the story, because my wife, as I mentioned, is a huge Christmas buff. We decorate the day after Halloween. She lives and breathes for Christmas, and she loves this story. I'm friends with people who absolutely hate the holiday. They hate hearing, Last Christmas playing at the stores, and they love it. So I think there's a little bit of something for everyone in here. Christmas ultimately, in some ways, is just a backdrop, but in other ways, you really the spirit resonates. But yeah, again, I don't know if I answered your question at all. I just started rambling, but yeah, that's where it
To
came
even go
from.
further into, you know, Periwinkle at this point, because obviously Periwinkle is a very tiny elf in a lot of ways,
Yeah,
and he's making toys, and Periwinkle's doing what Periwinkle does, and Periwinkle. I don't think Periwinkle's like Santa's right hand man by any stretch of the imagination. Again, I'm not as familiar with the elves, so if I'm speaking ill out of turn, so be it.
you're fine.
But I'm not knowledgeable in Santa's elves. Just for the record here, you know, I have many
No,
expertise that
you
is
didn't
not one
study
of them.
that. You didn't study that in high school.
Yes, yes, yes. I was sick that day.
You missed that
Clearly,
day.
no. In
Yeah.
between English and social studies, I took a personal day off, and that was the day we learned about the elves in 11th grade. So there you go. But all jokes aside, obviously, what was this like even building out Periwinkle? Because I'm presuming Periwinkle wasn't a murdering, killing elf, and I don't know what we call elves who kill elves, you know, in the world of whatever side that is, but, you know, alpha side, for lack of a better word. But it's
There you
this
go.
idea that I'm assuming, and I'm taking, you know, a leap of faith here, that Periwinkle was a very joyous individual, was happy making toys, was happy, you know, making boys and girls happy and making toys and being in the North Pole and working with Santa and having a good time. And then, well, you know, fast forward, Santa gets killed, and now Periwinkle is on this hunt to go and track down who did all of this. And what was that like, really building out Periwinkle? Because that's a dramatic transformation. And it's not like it happened gradually. It sort of happened almost like instantly and very quickly. And this entire thing where Periwinkle is hunting down the traitors. And it's somewhat biblical to some degree as well.
For sure. No, I mean that's again sums it up. That's great. Very biblical, very Shakespearean. I mean, within the first 5 pages, I have Periwinkle murdering his brother Pumpernickel. So we reverse engineer it from there on. I show you kind of the progression of what got him to that point. We have
Because
flashbacks.
Pumpernickel is not the first one who gets killed. There's Clementine,
Correct.
Marzalin, Hazel is on the list.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to ruin
That's
anything. I don't think this is
No,
really.
it's all yeah. That's all within like the first 10 pages. So yeah, and that's all up on the Kickstarter if you want to preview that. But yeah, exactly. He's about
Yeah, just to give an idea here, there's some pages here, and I purposely picked some pages that are not I don't have the list page readily available, but this should give you an idea that obviously it's a dark book and there's stuff going on. So, but continue.
Yeah, like you said, he's already, there were 4 elves that co-conspired with Krampus and Bellstickle to organize the coup. And then there were, like I said earlier, there are half the elves that ended up leaving with Krampus, but Periwinkle's primarily focused on the 4 that co-conspired, and then of course the big 2 players, Bellstickle and Krampus. So by the time we pick up the story, as I said, and the first 5 pages again is available in the preview, he murders his brother Pumpernickel, who was involved in it. So by the time the story picks up, we're already, 4 deep. We're about to head into the Bellstickle and Krampus saga portion of this story. And as far as I'm aware, Periwinkle is a original character. I don't think I mean, I hopefully didn't take that from any type of Santa lore. Just came up with the character, came up with that name. I wanted a very unassuming character. I typically, as you can see behind me, I write Legend of Everett Forge. I've also written Dead and Moon, which we've interviewed with you before on that one. And those characters are all just larger than life. These, you see them, you fear them. And that's kind of the protagonist I've always landed on. These kind of like badasses. So a big part too of Periwinkle is like I wanted to steer away from that. I wanted a character that you look at him, you're like, okay, he's a 3-foot elf. I'm not scared of him. And then I'm like, what's something that would add to his kind of unassuming, appearance? And I'm like, well, let's give him like a really, sweet, cute name. I don't exactly know where Periwinkle came from. I don't know if I was coloring with my daughter and I saw a crayon with that, but Periwinkle landed. So that's kind of Periwinkle's backstory. And then I just kind of created my own lore surrounding the elfhood. As far as Periwinkle's origins, it's a little different compared to the other Santa's helpers. And we do discover that in backstories. We discover what his tragedy, his trauma was. So even though, like you said, he is not Santa's number one, lead elf by any means. But you, again, through flashbacks and etc., you see where he tried to fit into the whole equation and desperately wanted that. And to have that rug kind of ripped out from underneath him, like that effect it had on an already kind of broken psyche, so to speak. Yeah.
And to even go further into this, because obviously Periwinkle has a sense of justice, and it might be
Yeah.
vigilante justice is a good way to put it, I think. And it goes into even the question of, what prompts somebody to want to go get justice and go become a vigilante, and also understand the concept of Periwinkle is, killing those who went against, I don't know if we call it an elf code, but killing Santa. And I guess in this case, Santa is not coming back. And there's that going on. But then also the other side of that, and that's why this is so interesting. And from what I've read, I sort of picked up that maybe Santa is not so innocent. Maybe there's a reason why these characters decided to kill Santa and decided to engage in doing something. And on the surface, what they did was bad. Maybe they're not the bad guys per se. And so there's a lot of stuff going in, because it's sort of revealed slightly with Pumpernickel making a statement about saying, well, something was going on. And it's complicated in a lot of ways. And so there's a lot of stuff going on now that it's the 4 elves who co-conspired with Krampus and Bellstickle are dead, and now we don't know the reason why, though. We don't know what Periwinkle knows and why he's doing it, and well, maybe Periwinkle's just as bad as Santa to some degree also. Super interesting and complicated.
Yeah, I mean you're killing it with like your your analysis of it, because that's exactly what we were trying to achieve with this story.
I read a lot of comics, and I've been doing
I
this
can
for
tell. I can
forever.
tell. Yeah, because we wanted that, and again through the story, it's going to be up to the reader to figure out who's telling the truth and who's not. Because there's another character I haven't introduced yet in the preview pages. He's coming up, but his name's Alabaster. He's one of the other elves he's the only other elf that remained behind with Periwinkle at the North Pole, and he's kind of like a surrogate father to Periwinkle. So you'll get his version of events, you'll get Periwinkle's version of events, you're gonna get Krampus's version of events, you're gonna get Bellstickle's version, Pumpernickel's. You're gonna see all these players kind of take on it, and it's gonna be up to the reader to kind of figure out who they're gonna believe with, who they're gonna believe. There's a quote that I always love is like the only difference between a villain and a hero is the one telling the story. So that I really want to explore in this narrative, and I think we've explored it. And it's going to again be up to you, the reader, to really surmise who was probably more right. Not necessarily who was 100% right, because there's always the truth is always somewhere in the middle of two people's stories, but to figure out who was probably more like 75% correct about Santa.
And then obviously we're also going into Krampus City and going into where Belsnickel and Krampus sort of live and their territory. We're going into at this point in this book, and so that's very interesting. Where if you like Christmas, you like the North Pole, you like things like that. Obviously, that's also a very different thing. Where the North Pole, from my understanding, and I know very little about the North Pole beyond the fact that it's cold as fuck there. I'm just saying. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
it's cold. Yeah,
And
yeah.
the only other thing I know is that everything is south if you're sailing right on the North Pole. That's the other thing I know is that everything is south from the North Pole. Um, those are the
It's
only two
true.
things I know. Those are the only two things I know about the North Pole. And I am not a Santa lore expert, but obviously, as we head more and more into pop culture, and I think with things like Netflix and all these Christmas movies that come out on Netflix that sort of are exploring the North Pole, there is a lot more stuff going on that has been introduced into pop culture. And I know every universe that has Santa has a different interpretation. I get that, but I also think that it's very interesting because I don't know all that much about Krampus. I don't. And I just think that, obviously when we go down diving into this, where that just adds into more stuff that's going on, even though this isn't your traditional Christmas story. So what is that like to play in that field too? Because once this is out there, people pick this up who like Christmas stories. They're like, oh, that's an interesting interpretation of what Krampus City looks like and what his territory looks like, much like what the North Pole looks like, if that makes any sense.
No, totally. The luxury is that there's established lore 1,000%. My mom's from Austria, so growing up, I would hear about the stories about Krampus and how he would visit, with Saint Nicholas, and he'd be dragging chains behind him. He'd have a satchel on his back, and the naughty kids he'd snatch up and throw on his satchel and punish and all that. Like horror-inducing nightmares as that was as a child, it really stuck with me. But yeah, over in Europe, huge character. Krampus is a huge character, and then depending upon where you're living and where you're from, Bellstickle and Krampus are interchangeable characters. So like the Pennsylvania Dutch, like Dwight Schrute, they honor the Bellstickle. Different areas of like Austria and those areas honor Krampus. So, and then depending, typical lore is that they are friends. They work together. To simplify matters to a great extent. They work together, a yin and yang type of situation. So it was fun to pull back because I've funny enough, I've actually posted some of my stuff to like Krampus boards on like Facebook and Reddit and etc. And I've gotten some heat from some very strong Krampus supporters, because it's like, well, Krampus and Santa are friends, and why would you do this? And I'm like, okay, well, that's the fun of writing stories, you know. It's like taking the thing and turning it upside down. And that's kind of what I get to do with this story, and explore more into the relationship, like again through flashbacks and through the narrative that Krampus and Bellstickle put forth to explore that relationship and what that relationship looked like between Santa and them, and how, you know, things and time shifted, and, you know, were they still functioning the way they should have functioned. And it was just a blast to write that and explore that lore that, again, is extremely established, you know, but also not ingrained in so much of, like, you know, our society's head, that I could play with it freely, not anger too many people about it, you know.
Yeah, no, I just think it's interesting because I don't know much about Krampus, minus the fact that Junkrat from Overwatch has a Krampus skin. That's as much as I know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
really terrible. It's really terrible. You know, that's as far as I go. And so I will be happy to take the flack. Somebody wants to screen record me on saying that, that's perfectly fine. That's as much as I know about Krampus. So obviously, I find this stuff to be so fascinating in every
Yeah,
which
for sure.
way. But I don't want to go too much further into this story because I don't want to ruin things. I don't want to press things. I actually want people to go out and back it if they're interested. But one of the things that I do want to talk about, and I think this is super interesting, is that, and I get flack for this too, where obviously I think this is an 80-page graphic novel, or what I like to refer to as a mini graphic novel. I don't think
Yeah,
my definition of a graphic novel, everybody, is 120 plus pages. And my
yeah,
definition of an omnibus is 500 plus pages. Doesn't mean that a beautiful one shot can't be square bound. I'm just saying. I'm just saying that there are beautiful books. Killing Joke is a 46 pager, and it is a beautiful
yeah,
hardcover book when you buy it at Barnes and Noble. It's beautiful. It's 46 pages. It is not a graphic novel. It's
yep.
a book. It's published like a book. But having said that, and all jokes aside, um, what is the entire reason and rationale for doing it very much like a graphic novel and more published like a book, and also doing this versing in 241 shots versus doing it all at once, and even the economics artistically as well as story wise, because a lot more content is now coming out in long form, and it's very interesting because legitimately 3 years ago I don't think that content like this was coming out in long form the way it is now.
Yeah, for sure. Um, just give like a little history on it. I had the idea for the story back in 2019, working on Undercity Tales with Mike Teener. Bad Bug wasn't yet a thing, but he was hoping to get his own banner started, and so he had asked me if I had any stories that I was working on. Told him this premise. He was like, "Hey, call me and let's talk about it." He was in love with it. So then he's been pressuring me every month, basically for 2 years. It's like, "Where's the Periwinkle script? Where's the Periwinkle script?" Um, I My initial versions to him, he'd be like, "Well, let this thing breathe a little bit," because we were talking about maybe just doing like a 40 pager one shot. The story that I wanted to accomplish, she's like, "I think you need to let this breathe more." So I expanded it. It got to, plus 80 plus pages, and then the question then became, well, do we do these in installments? Because it almost organically, well, not almost organically, turn into a chapter style book. So as you can see from that initial page, chapter one, Pumpernickel, breaks the story organically broke down to 3 chapters. Um, so then the question was like, do we release these, in 3 issues of, whatever it was coming out to? So we debated back and forth for quite a bit of time, just because, we were leaning towards maybe doing that. But I'm like, I think the story needs to be consumed by the reader, and by the art, and to become accomplished by the artist all in one shot. So I was like, and I wanted to break it down to like even page numbers and make it clean like that, but I'm like, the way the story unfolded, and like a lot of times for me as a writer, I find the story kind of ends up telling itself, and I'm almost just a conduit or a shepherd, so to speak, and kind of okay, stay within these parameters. So the story just kind of developed itself, found its ending, and it was just, to me, just like, chef's kiss perfection. I didn't want to mess with it. And so, I argued with Mike, not necessarily argued, but I told Mike, I'm like, I think we just need to do this in a single 80 plus pager. And he was gracious enough to be like, yeah, let's do this under the Bad Bug banner. He's, the biggest undertaking I've taken on. I think the biggest undertaking that Bad Bug's taken on currently. But his vote of confidence, Alice's vote of confidence, um, really inspired me to just stick to it and be like, yeah, let's do this as one big behemoth of a book. I realize it's not 120 pages. I agree with you on that. But definitely the biggest thing I've ever worked on. So in one shot. So yeah, long convoluted past to the origins of this page count.
Because I find it so interesting, and obviously I was speaking with J.S. Earls last night, and we were talking about this, and we were actually talking about economics, because I am way more on the economic side of comics, and I tend to probably be in more, if I was ever working in a company, as a chief financial officer versus a chief, or a COO, chief operating officer, where obviously one shots, one of the problems with one shots is that if you go to a comic store, they pick it up and then they love it, one shots don't bring customers back. And it creates a whole big issue. And they also, and if people love the one shot, they want more of it, and then you can't get it out fast enough. And it becomes a whole big issue with what's going on. And obviously, there's been a major shift in comics where a lot of companies, both, small press and indie, and even companies like Zenescope are doing a lot of one shots now, and doing a 72 page one shot is great for $8. It's not bad, and it's a lot of content, but at the same time, if you can't get that stuff out fast enough, it creates a big problem even in shops. And so it's a very interesting thing, because I've noticed the change, and I'm so interested when people are shifting over to that and how it works. And obviously on indie it's a little bit different than in mainstream, but I just think it's so interesting because it also goes to binge watching as well, where that's a big thing as well right now, where I just saw Cowboy Bebop. I watched the entire thing in 2.5 days. And January 1st, I'm legitimately going to be watching all of Cobra Kai right into day one of WWE. So the whole thing that I have going on is that it's very interesting for me, because I am not a writer, I'm not a producer of a comic, but I'm a consumer. And so I just find it so interesting, but I also understand the business side of things. And it's just fascinating that this is a major shift that has occurred. And you're not the first person that I've interviewed who's doing a lot of this stuff that is very much one shots. So I just find it super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, ever since I got the taste of it, it's going to be very hard to go back to the old method. You're doing single issues, because there was such a liberating freedom to it. I wasn't confined to those parameters, and I'm assuming, like a lot what Netflix writers must feel like with their shows, not having to stick to that 60-minute whatever format per episode. Just kind of, if an episode doesn't have that much content, you got to do like a half-hour bit on it. I mean, that's all well enough and good, in my opinion. It's about the story. It's not about how much time you took to tell it. And I feel like trying to squeeze a story into these molds, it a lot of times it takes from it. You either get an issue that maybe it was unnecessarily too long, or you get an issue that had to be squeezed too short to just fit into the whole flow of it. So it was really nice to break away from that and just tell a story, let it flow, like I said, just kind of shepherd it, but let it tell its way through organically, though it feels organic. I mean, I would have kept going to like 100 pages, honestly, if I felt this, if the story seemed like it needed to go that long. But it felt really tight. We've had it's been edited. They've looked at it. Everyone's thinking it's a tight thing. Artist is a huge fan of it. Arturo Mesa, who's a genius in and of himself. He loves the script, so I think having that freedom to just be able to tell the story however you want is just amazing, and it's something that the indie community especially gets to experience. Not so much, like the big publishers. They have to, like you said, with the financial part of it, have to stick to the program. But as far as indies go, we can kind of be our own outlaws, because we're not being micromanaged by anybody.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting, and I'm just very, very interested in where content is going because obviously I have a vested interest in how content is produced.
Yeah.
I am a media company. I'm more like a holding company at this point, but obviously I run two shows. I'm going to be running a third one sooner rather than later, and understanding just where media is going, and obviously I dabble in comic investing as well, so I am very, very interested in all this on a personal level. And I look at comics in a very interesting way, to say the least.
I
And
bet. Yeah.
I'm excited for May. And that's all I'm going to say. The biggest comic book deal is dropping in May. And it's not that hard to know what it is. It's a letter in the alphabet. That's all I'm going to give as a clue. So no, if you type in biggest comic deal, letter in alphabet, it will pop up. And if you don't understand what's about to happen in May, and tomorrow I get to complete what's important about that. So very, very cool in that regard. But I digress there. And also you've done something very interesting with this book where you have an advanced copy of His Name is Wrath, which is, I think, Bad Bug and everything that's going on with them. And so obviously this is, I don't know if His Name is Wrath is going to get a separate Kickstarter or if it's going to be released not in Kickstarter format and more direct to consumer. But what is the story of His Name is Wrath? And the basic story is that a mercenary from, I think, hell, or a mercenary out of nowhere appears as hell's unleashed upon Earth. And he wants to go save it, or they want to go save it, or it wants to go save it. I'm not too sure what Wrath is per se, but what is the story behind this? Because there's a physical, there's a digital copy being released, and
Yeah.
I don't want to say this is a double feature Kickstarter, but it's almost like an advanced copy that's tied in.
Yeah, it's in many ways it very much is a double feature. But yeah, I've been fortunate enough to see His Name is Wrath from its humble birth to what it currently is. And Mike has been gracious enough to offer that up in the Periwinkle Kickstarter. As far as his plans moving forward, how he wants to release that, I'm not exactly privy to that. But yeah, he wanted to get the advanced copies out to the Periwinkle backers. Yeah, you nailed it again with the stories about it's post-apocalyptic legions of hell have unleashed upon Earth, and there is a soul mech that takes on all kinds of hell spawn and demons. Funny story is that at the same time, both Mike and I were talking about doing a mech story, and he told me his premise of a mech versus legions of hell, and I quit. I was like, I can't top that. I mean, that's just the most badass story. So he ran with it and he knocked it out of the park. He's got a really great team behind it. Art looks gorgeous, as you can see in the Kickstarter. And there's a rich world that he's building with that you'll want to get in on the ground floor of. And what a better way to do that with like a deal, like to get an 80-page book and then the floppy for $35. I'm like, you won't find deals quite like that on Kickstarter, in my opinion.
Depends where you're looking.
What's that?
Depends where you're looking.
Depends where, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it's quite the stocking stuffer, what he's offering there. So yeah, great story. All the Bad Bug, to be honest, is all the creators that Mike has underneath him are just killing it. And that's another great thing about that Periwinkle Kickstarter is you can catch up on all the Bad Bug library. So Black Jackets, Midnight Highway, Pocus Hocus, which Will and Ellen are just freaking knocking it out of the park with that series, and they're coming out with issue number 3 in 2022. So there's a lot to offer, a lot you can get. But yeah, Bad Bug's coming in hot in 2022, so everyone needs to be ready.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of stuff going on, and even to dive into rewards because obviously there's a bunch of stuff happening, and you know, the digital is slightly steep for me, but it's also an 80 pager, and the digital is 15, so that's the digital, and it was very difficult because you made it a GIF, so I had to screenshot it, and that's why the
Oh,
screenshot was
okay.
messed up. I was letting everybody know, but that's the digital, but you're also getting the PDF of his name is Wrath. And then obviously you're getting 25 for, I believe, the soft cover.
Yep.
And so then it's 30 for, I think the physical Periwinkle and then a PDF of both. And then I think it's, obviously, I don't know, for B of Periwinkle. So that's the B cover. And then we go into the hardcover stuff right there. I won't do this quickly because I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I hope
Mhm.
this is pretty self-explanatory, everybody. I think there's a retail edition of that, and this is where we are. And I might have missed the 35 tier. I just might have just missed it by accident. So I don't think I have an image for that, but you all can imagine. But then we get into something like this. And what's the story behind this? Because this is the upper echelon of rewards. Typically I find anything, and I'm curious your opinion, anything over $100 on Kickstarter, I tend to think upper echelon as far as the high tier rewards.
Yeah.
And obviously this is 250. You're getting I guess Periwinkle's axe. I think is a safe assumption to say it.
Yep. It's been dubbed the Christmas Slayer. So I've stolen that from the people who have suggested it. But it's the weapon that's found within the book. It's in the book. It's built from the literal North Pole, and then the blade is made from the broken piece of slant, the runner from Santa's sleigh. Um, just love that design so much from Arturo, his finished design of it. So I'm a bit of a prop builder. So I made that replica there. We sent it, gave it to the Bad Bug team, and they looked it over, and they were really impressed by it. They thought that people would get a kick out of it. I think we've sold 2 so far out of the 3 we have available. So yeah, people are loving it. I think it looks great. I'm planning on hanging it above my fireplace because it's a great little Christmas piece. Especially if
This
you
is
got kind
just
of a
even talk about that because this is where things get interesting. Is that obviously building props is its own thing. I speak to a lot of cosplayers, and it's tricky, but also props bring out, I guess, a realness through the book. I don't know how many
yeah.
comics have props attached to them. I've seen obviously merchandising from DC and Batman and all that stuff. That's pretty obvious, but I don't know how many indie books fully understand merchandising or building props or going even into slightly the world of cosplay to some degree. And so what is that like to say, hey, for people who really like this or think this is cool, we're actually bringing a piece out of the book and showing that it can be actually made in the real world because that does change things. Even if you don't even back the book or back this pledge, actually seeing something physically, can change and, oh, this is got some real world application to some degree.
Yeah, and I think that's something that Bad Bug especially is hitting out of the park. I mean, if you've kept up with like Midnight Highway, for instance, at all, Mike's got um, there's a version of that book in 3D. So you put on like the old school 80s 3D glasses, and the pages literally like a comic book that literally pops out to you. I mean, I don't know many examples of that, and I thought that was just friggin' superb. He had a VHS tape offered through the last Kickstarter, just a bunch of unique things. Pocus Hocus, they got like a little version of the pink rabbit in there called Horace. That was a tier. Um, I think indies we don't have all the luxuries of the big guys as far as merchandise goes, so we do the best we can. And in my opinion, it's probably higher quality than you're gonna get from some throwaway item from DC or Marvel. And a lot of times it's like birthed out of the hard work of a creator, like the Horus little doll things, like somebody hand, painstakingly made those by hand. And to have that on a story that you love, and that you on a creator who's pouring their blood, sweat, and tears into their story. I mean, I think it's pretty cool. I mean, maybe I'm just too close to it to like not see it beyond that, but I'm just impressed by everything that, Bad Bug and just the indie community in general are doing, because they're not writing stories necessarily to make money, because there's really no money in it. They're telling stories because they just love to tell stories.
There's very little money in comics, and there's very little money in wrestling, in which that
Yeah,
is something that I am understanding very, very well. And I think people need to realize that there's very little money in what I'm doing. I
yeah,
mean, it's complicated, and that's why things are shifting. And even moving into 2022, obviously I'm shifting outward into other areas, and my show is going to evolve, and it has to, because I get it. And at the end of the day, I would like to make money. I would like to afford things. And I'm also smart enough to know that this will never be a full-time job. This is, at some point, it will be bonus money for me, because the
yeah.
likelihood and I think if you go into comics that way, I think comics is a hell of a lot easier path than anything else.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have no, I'm very well aware. I'm not going to be selling anything to Netflix or anything. It's a hope, obviously, but I'm a realist at the end of the day. And even if I did make it as a writer, I think I would still keep a 9 to 5 job, just as that security net. And I like, because I work at a hospital, so I enjoy the switching between left brain, right brain, because I'll spend all day doing data and spreadsheets and all that, and then like at 5 o'clock I get to like shut that down, and then I get to go tell stories. So
See,
I
see,
think,
see, I'm very different, because I understand that, I want paydays. That's what I want in my life. I want days where I'm making 40 grand, and that's like a 40 grand bonus. And then I'll happily develop a whole IP, sell to Netflix, get an option. They'll pay me 2,500 to 5 grand. Maybe they'll make it into something, maybe they won't. Maybe I'll get money on the back end, but then I'll move on to the next thing, because, or I want a royalty. Because I like both those concepts. But I got no problem. That's why I'm always gonna have a 9 to 5 position, and I'm open at some point in my life. I get to have 3 or 4 paydays every single year, where maybe I develop a comic and then I sell it at the end of it, and that I develop 4 issues, I make a little bit of money, but then I just sell the complete rights to a company and get paid like 15 grand for it, and then it's not my problem anymore, and then I go do the next one. And that's a very different business model than what normal people think. I understand my entire company is built into sections. My website, Conversations in Pop Culture, Pop Anime Comics Lounge, my T-shirt division, all that stuff can be spun off and sold off very easily. And there's a mentality that if somebody came and made me a good offer on, a piece of my company, I could spin off parts of it very, very effectively and get really big paydays off of it. And that's not out of the question, because I understand where media is going. And if Netflix said, we want to buy all your library, and they made me a good offer, I mean, Netflix offered me $2 million. I'm done. I'm in. And so
yeah.
I'm smart enough to understand that that's how I set up my company, for a reason. And it's a very different entity. It's a very different way how to think. And this is why I'm going to be the worst comic writer, because I'm going to write to sell, and to spin things off, and not write for the sake of telling stories. And I'm the antithesis of most indie comic creators, because I'm too business jacked up on it, and I'm well aware of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and I mean, I get it. I get the grind for sure. But I've always said I just want to make enough off of this to just continue to do it. I'm it gets tiring breaking the bank to like write out the story, you know, and get the art done, and then have to rely on Kickstarters and stuff like that. It's a little bit tiring. I'd love to just be able to make enough again to just pump out the next issue and then pump out the next. I just love telling stories, honestly. It's not hyperbole or anything like that. I genuinely do love it. Um,
So I'm not against telling stories either. I enjoy, reading stories. I enjoy reading good stories.
yeah,
But I am just, I come from a whole different position where obviously running an eBay business for 10 years changes the way you function and how you analyze things. And also versus using store of value. And it's very different because I came from mainstream. So I'm most people in indie say, hey, I'm an indie and that I maybe want to write for Marvel or I maybe want to do this or I want to be competitive against places like Marvel or Dark Horse or Titan Comics or Scout, for instance, or DC, or I want to, get my book into Image or be competitive to an Image book. And that's great. I came from the other way where I saw the writing on the wall. And so I still do, mainstream, and I love mainstream to some degree. And I do people from DC and Marvel and Image all the time on this show. But at the same time, I also recognize that a lot of stuff's happening in the indies and the next generation is being born. And so this was a business decision, me coming into indies and doing Kickstarter people. It has nothing to do with, because I could easily go the other way at any given point. So it's so interesting for me because if I ever write a comic, and chances are I will at some point, it's about money. It really is. It's about developing something that is either, but I'm also not going to write like a half-assed story, but the end game is to produce money and it's to produce a profit. And I'm not interested in losing a profit. And that's the end game. So that affects the way I write. It affects the way I market. It affects the way I do things. I'm going to be launching a Kickstarter in January. I'm setting up an entire monetary position because, again, there is a number that needs to be hit in order for it to be make sensible, I guess, for lack of a better word. So that's just my thought process on all this. And it's a very different entity than you and everybody else in the indie comic world. And this is why we all hate each other.
I mean, I don't think you're too far off base. I'd be lying if I said I'm not, I don't want to make money off this. I just have to be realistic. Like you said, there's not a lot of money in comics in general, but the indie community even more. So it's a tough thing. There's some creators out there who are killing it, and I'm constantly impressed by them.
But there's also creators, and them, and I'm going to paraphrase his quote saying, 10 years ago, I had more money, and now I don't. And my question to those creators is that, well, were you producing comics 10 years ago, and were you fronting the money for your Kickstarters and doing 3 Kickstarters, dropping 18K, or before that, and then obviously you recoup it, but you don't recoup all your 18K so quickly because comics are a business that requires a lot of cash up front. You hope that you get that cash back, and it can take you 2-3 years on a particular book, and especially in indies, to get your cash back. And it's a very cash up front business, and there's nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of businesses that operate that. There are businesses that are worth multi-billions of dollars now that started out that way. But it's the idea that this is why I haven't written a comic yet, is because I can't financially sustain it. I'm building a small little nest egg if I want to do it, but also there are a million other things that I think that, can be done, that I can make real money in, that are much easier, much cleaner, and much more enjoyable for me. So I'm at that stage where I'm looking for the easiest path as well. But going back to my point is that there are a bunch of creators that I know that are maybe doing 30, 40,000 on Kickstarter, but they're making less money than they were making 10 years ago. Not because they're making less money, they just have more bills. So it's very interesting.
Sure.
Because if you look at the upper echelon in this entire world, I mean, how many people are doing big money like Brian Pulido is? That's a very unique club. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I know plenty of people are doing $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 campaigns, and they're doing that 4 or 5 times a year, and that's impressive. If you're doing $50,000 to $70,000 on Kickstarter across 5 or 6 books, that's a very impressive, you know, number to do every year.
Yeah,
But
for
that,
sure.
but that's also, not your profit. That is
No.
what you brought in. That's pre, that I forget the terminology, but it's that is almost sales before you calculate cost. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
But obviously, I mean, this is all inside baseball. This is my favorite topic to talk about. I love,
Yeah.
I love, I love educating people when they come into Kickstarter. When somebody sees that somebody says, "Oh, you did 100,000," and then you realize that, oh snap, you had costs of 70,000. You didn't make 100,000. That's something that I think people don't understand on Kickstarter. Is that that's a big misconception? Is that if you did 20,000, you didn't make 20,000 on this book.
Oh yeah, not even close. No. I mean, like with Everett Forge, my book, the money I've made, it's never cost. I've never made the goal enough to cost or to cover, printing and all that. It's just enough to get the art done. So out of pocket, I'm paying for production costs. There's for me at least, and I'm not saying I'm business savvy by any means. I'm probably the worst businessman you'll find, but I again, it was just to get my stories out there, to get my library built and started. And then just to circle back on that one more time with the indie creators. I mean, that's anyone out there who's on the fence, because I know there's some people who just stick to the main publishers. Um, you're not gonna find and you're not gonna find better stories out there, in my opinion, than what the indies currently producing. And yeah, you're gonna pay a little bit more. Um, but I'd much rather pay $10 for a floppy of a good story than just give,
$10. That's what you're going with.
to,
Most are
it,
15.
well, yeah. Well, with the
Cover
with
80.
shipping and top of it, yeah, they do like $5 shipping or something
Oh,
like
I'm
that.
not even talking about that. I know people who sell cover A's for 20, and I'm like, oh my God, like
That's extensive. That's
it's very expensive. And there are friends that I can't back your book because I can't justify buying a Keith Garvey book from Zenescope for $20 and buying your cover A on Kickstarter for $20. I can't justify that in my head.
That's a lot,
Where
yeah. I mean, my Everforge, like I did $10, and
I
then
could pay
like
10
three, like
for
three
an
dollars
indie
for
book.
shipping or something like that. But again, I'm more than willing to pay that. I'd pay even 15 for a good story rather than $4 for something DC and Marvel have just
So,
spit
so
out
I, I
again.
get I get capped out at a 24 or 30 pager at $10 is really where I get capped out for a regular
And
cover
I get it. I totally get it.
because I'm willing to pay. I paid $2.50 on previews, so I'm willing to pay a 4x multiple on indie. So I can see ground extensively. That's a big ground to concede, and I don't mind doing that. For variants on indies, I don't mind paying what I call Zenescope prices or Comic Man prices or
Yeah.
Frankie's comic prices for variants. I got no problem conceding ground on that, and I'll do it, and I do it all the time. My problem is that when you're charging me $20, which is almost 10 times what I pay for a like Gun Honey, for instance. And Gun Honey, I mean, I enjoyed Gun Honey. The first issue, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm paying 10 times what I paid for Gun Honey, and your book is good. I enjoy people's books, but at the same time, that's where I get lost because I can't justify it. Because if I dig deep enough in previews, I can find stories. I mean, it could take me 3 hours to go through previews to find what I want, but I could find it for $32 versus 2 books on Kickstarter. Now, it requires a lot of work, and I agree that there are way better stories on Kickstarter right now than in comics, but you can find them, and it's just like, and I get it. I'm willing to pay more, but there gets a point where I'm priced out of the market.
Well, yeah, I totally understand that as well. And I mean, I think that like my comments are more for the people who are on the fence with Kickstarter to begin with, as
Oh,
far as when to delve
you
into it.
should absolutely do a Kickstarter, but you should also fully know what you're getting into, is all I'm going to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, people who are on the fence between like buying, indie or just going mainstream. Um,
Buying is different than actually physically doing a Kickstarter.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Like my argument here is people who are on the fence of going in the indie route because it costs more. They can get a story from mainstream for far cheaper. My point is to them, the indie community is pumping out things that are 3 times worth what you're getting at the other mainstream publishers. So that's to anyone out there watching, out there in the universe.
Also, with indie, and I'll say this, is that one of the things that you should do is that you should look around on Kickstarter, because there are stories are differently valued on Kickstarter. One of the problems I have as a consumer, and I'm tempted to create a game show out of it, almost like, Comic Tank, is that I run into the problem now where I have $25 every month to put on Kickstarter, and there's 7 or 8 stories or books I want to back, all for the same price. And I'm going to enjoy all 8 of them, but I can't buy all 8 of them. And how do I determine which ones to buy? And it's a real problem right now, where it's this idea where I'm like, okay, what do I do now? And my theory and my joke and the show I want to create is I'm going to get 8 to 10 people and say, look, you got 5 minutes to convince me to buy your book. I'm running through in the next hour all 10 of you, and then I'm going to figure out whose book I'm going to buy. And you got to make me a pitch, and you got to figure out how to sell me the book. And if that means that you're going to throw some cool stretch goals in there, if you're going to try to sell me on something else, if you're going to say, hey, if we reach A, B, C, and D, or, this is what's going to happen, and I think we're going to get there, like, all that stuff matters. And that's the other thing that I think is very cool about indie, though, is that there's also, right now, there's a lot of things that you could look at. So you could also be very picky on Kickstarter, and it's also a lot more transparent for people who are consumers. And it's a cool thing to be in at the moment.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. To all the consumers out there who are watching, like, if you haven't yet delved into the Kickstarter community, and I'm not even going to just narrow it down to comics, the short films and board games and all kinds of stuff that are coming out of that platform. Yeah. I mean, it's just dividends more than what you're going to find coming out of the mainstream. So anyone who is just not sure if they should try and pay the extra and get the better quality, in my opinion.
There's a lot of cool stuff coming out on Kickstarter, and also there are certain circumstances like Curse Words by Charles Soule and Ryan Brown, where that book was not in stores. I don't know if it'll ever be in stores, but if it was to be done in stores, Image would divide it into 2 books, and it would be about $20 to $25 more expensive. So sometimes on Kickstarter, books are also cheaper because people can do it their way, and especially in volume. Their way. When you're producing a $120,000 Kickstarter book, that's a 32-page with 2 other stories, so it's 34 issues and a nicely bound book. There you go. So it's something that I think is also very cool in that regard, where a lot of stuff like that is also now coming into Kickstarter. So a lot of cool stuff's coming with Kickstarter. Totally big tangent on rewards right there. So clearly that's what we do now. But also you have some other stuff. Obviously the Bag Bug collection. There's some Stalker stuff in there. I have this picture as well. You could be in the book. And I think that's included in one of the tiers, but also it's an add-on, I believe. And then there's also this, where you got postcards, and then stickers are always fun as well, where you got die-cut stickers, so those are cool as well.
Yeah, they're really cool.
I don't know how you feel about candy corn, so I'm not going to throw that image up. I love candy corn, so I'm not going to. I don't know where you stand on the fence of candy corn. It's a very hot political issue.
It's all right. I don't want to piss anybody off out there, any candy corn aficionados.
It's one of the most controversial political issues of the day. Is the candy corn debate. Some people are for candy corn, some people aren't. And everybody can think, and you could substitute candy corn with whatever you want, but I am legitimately talking about candy corn. because this is what I'm talking about. So if you think this is a political discussion, it is extremely political.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I will die on this hill. I promise. But obviously, there's a lot of stuff going on with this book and everything that's happening. You're fully funded. Now it's just a matter of the more money you raise, obviously, the more it covers art, the more it covers printing, the more you get to stretch goals. Obviously,
Yep.
hopefully, you're going to get to a point where it's not going to, you could actually pay yourself, you know, at this
Yeah.
point. That's the idea.
This story I love so much. I mean, again, I am not trying to come off as anything disingenuous, but genuinely, I just want to get that story out to people. I'm very, very happy with what's been created. Arturo's art, just a big shout out to Arturo Mesa, the artist. He is elevating it to such an extent. The art is just superb. So the whole team, all of us, whatever, even if we had to take a huge loss on this, we wholeheartedly would, because we are that confident in the story. So, yeah.
Yeah, no. I absolutely feel you and understand everything in that regard. So obviously, that's what's coming out with that. And then also one of the things that I just want to let everybody know that, obviously when you pledge, you don't get billed immediately on Kickstarter. That's super important to know. And then this book is coming out, I think, next September. So it's a little whiles off, just so everybody's fully aware that, obviously you guys are going to take a little time to push it out, but you will get it for Christmas season in 2022, which is kind of nice. So keep that in mind.
And just more on that. I mean, they tell you to give that 3-month buffer. And the way Arturo's pumping out the art, we're probably going to be way ahead of that schedule. So if anyone's kind of terrified of that, timeline, just know that that's kind of just recommended practice to give yourself like a 3 to 4 month buffer. But again, Arturo killing it. He's moving fast. We're working on pages as the Kickstarter goes. We didn't take a pause or anything. We're going to work through the holidays, all through as many months as we need to get this out to you guys ASAP.
Yeah, no. I agree, and I'm looking forward to it. And then obviously, I do want to back out of the entire, thing that is going on with this, and I do want to talk about cons, COVID, Kickstarter. So I am curious your thoughts on where do you think COVID is going as far as conventions and Kickstarter and everything that's sort of happening with it?
God, that's a heavy subject, the whole COVID thing. I don't know. I think it's just reinventing how everyone views everything, how everyone views work, life, entertainment. I think just with proper protocols, cons should just continue on as is. I don't want to get into the vaccine debate or anything like that, so we'll leave that for another topic or another discussion. But yeah, I mean, it's just I think it's a whole renaissance the way we're looking at life now. So and that'll probably change cons for the good, the worst. I mean, it's constantly evolving, so I don't even know. I don't even know if I could comment on it, to be honest.
And then even going further, because I won't make you. You could take the fifth. You could take the fifth, and
Yeah.
you go wild and out on that one. But even going further off of that, where do you even think though, like Kickstarter is going to go? Because obviously Kickstarter has gone through a very interesting evolution during COVID, and it's been killing it in the last 22 months. Obviously, I've backed a lot of Kickstarters where I came back in. I did one Kickstarter way before this, and then I left Kickstarter for about 2 years, and then I came back for Curse Words, and then I only backed those 2 projects, and then during the COVID era, I guess we're still in it, I backed about 31 projects in the last 22 months. A lot of cool projects. I only backed, I think, 2 of them digitally, which is sort of cool as well. So, and I've gotten a bunch of, things that have come out and whatnot, and I'm still waiting on a bunch of other books to arrive. But obviously, as things open up and things move forward, and more projects on Kickstarter, and also big names coming in and out of Kickstarter. Where do you think all that's going? Because a lot of factors, and Kickstarter has evolved as a platform where it's now not just indie on Kickstarter. There's a lot of other people on Kickstarter as well. And
Yeah.
so in the comic space. And so I'm curious how you feel that's going. And I guess a secondary question is that, do you think it's sustainable? Because a lot of projects are now on Kickstarter. I think, what is it, like 260 was just on between October and in November. And I think December's a little less, just because December is a nightmare of a
Yeah.
month.
Yep.
But it's very interesting with that. I'm curious how you feel about that.
I just think COVID in general has altered beyond just our societal landscape, our entertainment landscape, and how we digest entertainment.
The digital to pivot 2.0 is a good way to put it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've honestly gotten a little spoiled with the, release, the day of release coming onto streaming service for some movies, like HBO Max, what they all did. Now when I see a movie that I want to see and I'm like, oh, it's only in theaters, like, damn, like, because I got kind of spoiled over the past year just having that, readily available on my TV. I think it's just COVID in general has pushed people to different methods I think it's forced us to think outside the box from a marketing standpoint, especially too. And then how they can deliver entertainment. Like there's those shorts that were shot during COVID where, due to the restrictions, you couldn't have a full studio setup. So, there's some examples where, a crew of like 3 people shot like a film. I feel in some way, I don't want to say that it's been good.
So I could tell
But
you my thoughts on it, and
yeah,
this might help, because then I'm curious how you think about it. Is that I don't know if I'm ever going back to a con. I don't know in which that I'm going to be going and trying to build something that is not a replacement to Kickstarter, but deals with the aftercare of Kickstarter, just not on Kickstarter, that I think is going to change the way indie comics are marketed. And it's not a new concept. It's just never been done with indie comics. And I think I'm the guy who can do it. I'm just parsing out legality on it. And that's the hold up with a little bit of seed money that I'm slowly accruing. And that's coming, late February, early March. In my world, I'm going to be launching a Kickstarter probably in January in the podcast space. And I am part of digitalization pivot 2.0, because why the hell do I want to go back to a con when the world is my audience? I reach people from Australia, from the UK, from Germany, from Canada, from all 50 states. And I get that I'm a podcast, but if you're writing a comic, why do you just want to be limited at a convention? And I understand I give up networking slightly with person to person, but I just shot a message to Ralph Tedesco, and I now can shoot a message to Ralph or anybody at Zenescope, and they know exactly who I am. And I get a bunch of their writers and a bunch of their staff anytime I want for an interview, so I can shoot them a message. And like, yeah, sure, why not? I got nothing going on. And then there's a lot of other people, and then you come down. I mean, I haven't announced it yet, but I'm having one of the Cowboy Bebop comic cover artists next Wednesday on my show, which is a big deal on the day the book's actually coming out, which was purposely intended. So my point is that, so the way I feel is that I don't want to go back, because going back to me doesn't make any sense. It's the same reason why, if I'm to ever write a book, I don't want a distributor. I want to do it all myself, because at this stage in the game, I don't want somebody taking my 20%, out of it. I want to market direct to consumer. I'll go find an influencer who has a big enough audience that'll help get it. I'll pay them whatever fee they want, and they're going to bring more money to me and more to my brand. And so that's how I feel as an individual, and I'm doing it. And I mean, I'm actually making money. This is the first time in the, podcasting live streaming world in 9 years, almost 9 years I've been doing this, that I'm actually making money. I mean, Mixum, they just renewed their sponsorship. I'm negotiating another one, hopefully where I'm going to get it. And I don't want to go backwards, and I've never made money at a con. And I get I'm not comics per se, but I am media, and I've never gotten a press badge. I've never gotten, any followers. I've lectured for hours, and my point is that I'm now making money, and I actually have more viewership than I've ever had before, whether that's live or on replay. When I post this into a bunch of groups, and then when this gets into podcast, it's going to have more viewership too. So I'm at that stage where I'm in digitalization pivot 2.0, and I don't see the point in going back. And that's how I feel about cons, is I think they're dead. As far as sales, I think they have other applications. But I think if you think cons are going to save you from selling, I recommend you get real acquainted to digitalization 2.0, and that you hit me up come mid-February, because what I'm going to unveil is going to save everybody in indie comics, and you're all going to copy it. And I just want to make my first million, and then you all can copy, because I'll give it to you for free after I make my first million.
Nice. Wow. Nice, dude. No, that sounds awesome. Yeah, I mean,
so that's how I feel, and I think that because I understand there's a pivot going on, and I'm definitely moving into the pivot, and it's a very different entity. But enough about my sequiloquy here. I am not Shakespeare, and as much as I think I'm Julius Caesar, I am not.
I don't know if you want to be Julius Caesar.
Augustus. I am Augustus because Augustus survives.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say Julius is the wrong guy to be like. Yeah.
Hey! You know what it is? The saying is that what is the saying? You if you live long enough, you see yourself, you become the villain.
Oh yeah, either
so
die
Julius
a hero.
Is not the villain. That's all I'm gonna say. It was Brute. Brutus was the villain.
Bruce was the Judas. Yep.
There's a reason why things rhyme in society, but I digress. So obviously, I do want to play lightning round now with you. So lightning round is biggest pet peeves with Kickstarters. Not Kickstarter the platform, but Kickstarters and comics.
Oh shoot, I don't know, man. An overloading of prints. I mean, I like prints. I have a collection of prints, but yeah, I don't need to be offered 30 prints for one book. There's no story on the print.
If you get a print as a stretch goal for free, that's good, right? Because you don't have.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Because Jamie Tyndall did that for one of his projects, and I was completely blown away. Not because the print's expensive to produce. I know how much a print costs to produce. Like an 11 by 17. I mean, that was a nice stretch goal, because that changed the shipping. That's what was cool about it. It was the thought that counted.
Yeah.
I thought it was the thought that counted, because it changed his shipping versus, because I just ordered a little tiny comic. I'm like, dude, you got to put this in a Gemini. And then a nice big box, and I use that box now to store all my prints. And every once in a while, Zenoscope sends me an 11 by 17 that I win. And so I'm always thrilled when they send me stuff. There's a great cover of Black Sable with some gold coins and possibly not clothed. So I'm just saying, that's my art style that I like. There's a reason why I like certain projects that Mike does. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no kidding.
I don't hide anything here. Second lightning question is that what makes you back a Kickstarter? Beyond story.
Beyond story.
So I'll give it to you. You walk into a Kickstarter. There's 9 Kickstarters. They're all the same price. What makes you back Kickstarter C versus Kickstarter D or E or F or A, for that matter? Taking story out of the equation.
I mean, obviously, art is going to be a big thing. If I like that style, something unique, something different, something you don't see in the mainstream, I'm a big proponent of. So those super crazy, off the wall styles that you can discover on Kickstarter, I think probably art.
And then the other flip side to that question, which is question 3, is what makes you not back a Kickstarter? Because that's something that I'm curious about.
trying. I
So
think a
say both.
lack of a lack of interior pages on the campaign. If you're just showing me prints and a cover, I'm not too inclined to want to back that because I don't know what the hell I'm gonna get. I mean, yeah, your face level looks all nice and pretty, but what's going on the pages? Or if they do and there's no lettering, um, I mean, lettering such an underappreciated art, and Dave Lentz, he's the one that's lettering Periwinkle. I've told him that he's, his art form is extremely underappreciated because
And that's assuming. Have you ever read a non-word bubbled comic?
yeah, yeah,
So I have read a comic that had no words in it at all. It was
yeah, for sure.
it was brilliant. It's these cute little dinosaurs by this girl named Emily So. Most beautifully fun comic I ever read because and I interviewed her and I was so stoked. And I want to I got to actually buy that book. So I read it digitally and brilliant. And I got to say, whoever the letterer was on that book, amazing job. Just amazing. But I digress because there's no letters in it. Oh, but Dave Lentz is amazing at what he does.
Oh yeah, he's for
He's
sure
not
top.
just a letterer. He's very much an editor when he goes into things.
Yep, totally. Yeah, which I appreciate. I mean, I love when we've worked on a few projects now. Dead and Moon was the most recent one we just finished up. So I love getting his critique and just watching him do his thing. And he'll send me, screenshots of what his flow was, and I'm like, dude, it's just underappreciated. And like, it's an artwork that goes unnoticed because when it's done right, you don't notice it.
It's very much like
Such a
Coverist,
shame. Yeah.
where I've had Sanju Navagunan, and Sanju, for those who don't know, he's an amazing colorist, and his work is all over Zenescope. And it was cool because he's in India, so I interviewed him in India, and I should have let him breathe a little bit during that interview. It was a mistake I made, but Sanju was nervous, and I was terrified. But it's the idea
No,
that
no.
what people don't understand is that what Sanju does is he is not, I feel honored enough. I don't want to say respect because I think he's respected, but it's underappreciated is the word. Because
Yeah.
when he does his job right, nobody notices it. But when
Yep.
you do your job wrong, everybody notices it real quick. So it's so interesting in that regard. And then the final question I have in lightning round is graphic novel soft cover or hardcover?
Hardcover. I'm a sucker for hardcover. That's what I told Mike when we were talking about Periwinkle. I'm like, my one stipulation for this campaign is we offer a hardcover edition of this book. Just love the feel of a hardcover book. I don't think you can beat that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, that's all for lightning round. It's relatively quick. It doesn't always end quickly. It's a new segment in my interview stuff. So obviously, you are the second person to come through lightning round.
Nice.
So it's a lot of fun, and obviously it's supposed to be quick answers, and I think it's also just fun, and it's an easy thing for me to cut out and just throw up on YouTube as a short for all those who are interested. But even going beyond all that, and we've been speaking for a while, and I don't want to keep you here all night. I do want to give you a chance for self-promotion. So where can people find you? Where can people support you? Where can people bother you? I don't know if you're accepting work on certain projects or if you're already swamped enough. But obviously, where can people find everything that you're doing, social media, the Kickstarter, please seriously check it out. Where can people find that? I know it's up above in the description, either up above or down below on YouTube, Facebook. But yeah, where can people go and support you collectively?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, man. On Instagram, Scott Wilke 24. I'm on Twitter, Swilke SWILKE_smooth. On Twitter, I'm on Facebook, YouTube. Just look me up, Scott Wilke. Also, just doing a lot with Bad Bug Media right now. So we were working on Undercity Tales 2. We're working on Dead End Moon 2. I'm writing for also About Time Comics for Lee. Red Scare #1's done. We're probably going to crowdfund that coming up here shortly. We're going to start working on Red Scare #2 already. I got Legend of Everett Forge #4 in the works. I got about halfway done on that. And I am available to write anything and everything. So if anybody needs a writer, I am just, I love to write. And so, yeah, hit me up. I'm open to any type of story.
Well, maybe eventually, maybe I'll hire you as a co-writer on
Hey,
a
man,
project.
you know where to reach me, man. I'd love that. That'd be fun.
Maybe, yeah. I got an idea that could be a lot of fun, and it's going to be a good one. But I don't want to give it away so quickly live. Um, but having said all that, and I've been saying it collectively, and I'm going to continue to say it, is you have to support indie comics and indie comic creators. Again, we're not DC, we're not Marvel, we're not Image, Dark Horse, Titan Comics, and those companies are fine. I like those companies, but
Yeah.
those companies have a bankroll. A lot of indie comic creators do not. And all the money that goes into the campaign goes into the book. And it's very important that people say, okay, hey, I'll throw $5 if it's just a digital, or 15 digital, 25 for a physical, 30, 35 or more, because all that money that goes into the project. And it is super important. And, while following people on social media, watching YouTube content, watching everything they do, that's important too. Money, it really does dictate a lot of what can be done. And it is helpful, and a lot of people do self-fund and throw money into this. I think this statistic is that 90% of comic creators do not recoup their investment. So obviously when you pledge on Kickstarter, you're helping to get that number down, and it goes a long way. And even with Kickstarters, that number is relatively high. So it does go a long way. And the money somebody funds on Kickstarter is not the money they receive. So keep that in mind as well. Furthermore, though, money's tight. We are in December. It is December 1st. I know money's tight in my world a little bit, where I am definitely selective on when I'm buying it, what I can afford. And so I completely understand when people can't afford to back projects. Obviously, a lot of people are still hurting financially due to COVID and everything that's occurred. But if you're in that circumstance, retweeting things, following people on Twitter, retweeting things, following people on Facebook, liking things, sharing things out. I appreciate when people share out my interviews. I really do. And I would imagine you appreciate when people share out the Kickstarters. It goes a long way, because Facebook algorithms are not what they used to be. Instagram algorithms are not what they used to be. So it's something that's very, very important, because a share can be worth just as much as a pledge. And it goes a long way, as well as signing up for people's email lists and a variety of other things that are occurring. So I highly recommend that people share things out, follow things. If you back it, also let people know that you backed it, because that gives a vote of confidence. And Kickstarter makes it very easy to do that on Twitter, and I think even on Facebook to some degree. So that is super important in doing that, because both of those things are important. And you should be doing at least one, because sharing out on social media is free. If you can't back it, obviously please share it out there, because it goes a long way. But if you can back it, do so and share it out, that you backed it, and share the project out, because it goes a long way. As far as I'm concerned, because I'm going to promote myself now, obviously if you're looking to print comics, Mix'em is a great company. If you already have a printer, BCW supplies 10% when you're bagging and boarding books up. That's super helpful as well. Or BCW supplies offers long boxes, short boxes, Pokemon card holders, whatever you need in ephemera, for lack of a better word, to be stored. BCW supplies can get you covered. And if you use Pop Anime Comics, that is POPANIMECOMICS Comics, it's in the description down below or up above, you get 10% off. And if you're ordering a lot of stuff, bags and boards are expensive. If you're ordering 300 to 500 of that, 10% off of that is around $50. And it does go a long way, as well as you could buy me coffee, which is a website much like Patreon, and I appreciate all the support there, because all the money goes back into this entire project and allows me, God forbid, I run into a sponsorship problem, to continue. Because while my sponsors do help me and do cover expenses, it is tough and it is brutal out there, and there are a lot of expenses running this project. So I appreciate all the support, but more importantly than all that, please just share it out, like it, and like my Facebook page and all my other subsequent social media on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, because that's how you can catch this show, because I want people to actually watch it. So on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Just back Periwinkle. It's a freaking blast. We really do love this story. I think it's unlike anything you've ever seen. It's definitely unlike any other Christmas story you've ever read. It's the art again is top notch. Arturo Mesa is gonna one day be extremely, extremely famous, and this is like his fourth book or something like that. So own something by that guy before he's some big guy that you can't afford his art. So yeah, and back all Bad Bug stories, because like I said, 2022 is going to be a big year for Bad Bug. Sequels are coming out for all of them, so get in on the ground floor of these stories, because again, they are unlike anything in the indie community right now.
Well, I couldn't have said that any better myself, so I believe that is a wrap.
Awesome. Thank you, man.